Hello, good day to you all. My name is Matthew Clark. I am a client risk management partner with Partners and. We are the next generation business advisory company, helping organizations of all sizes to understand the risks that threaten their businesses and organizations, and to do something about those risks using effective risk management tools and occasionally insurance. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to talk today about cyber risk, and my thanks to Wendy and her team at the BAFSA for allowing us on today to do this for you. There will be plenty of time to ask questions at the end of the presentation, and indeed do please note them down, and I'd be happy to address any issues that you have at the end of the presentation. So we're going to talk about cyber risk today. We're going to talk about what it is, how to recognize cyber risk, how to effectively manage cyber risk so you don't fall foul of its consequences, and how to insure it. And this is designed very much with businesses and organizations of all sizes in mind. So wherever you sit on the size scale, this is equally relevant to you. So launching straight in, first of all, what is cyber risk? Well, technology has revolutionized our everyday activities. It's brought huge convenience to the way that we operate, the way that we integrate with our customers and counterparties and our staff. Sadly, it's also made it very straightforward and easy for certain types of criminals to operate too online. It's far more lucrative, far easier actually for criminals to ply their trade digitally online, rather than the old-fashioned way of breaking into your premises and stealing stuff. So in relation to cyber risk, when we think about cyber risk, what we're really concerned with is a modern form of crime, of criminal behavior. And cyber risk relates to that criminal behavior and describes its outcomes. And cyber insurance, when you hear that phrase, is the type of insurance that protects against that type of risk. So looking at that in a bit more detail, we can explain cyber risk and describe cyber risk as the chance of suffering some kind of loss from this new type of criminal activity. Whereas previously, insurance was focused on physical assets, protecting your buildings, your offices, your contents, your machinery, your stock, those kinds of items. Still very, very important, of course. With cyber insurance, what we're concerned about is protecting you as you operate within the new threat landscape of the internet, of using corporate networks, of using email systems, of using online banking systems. Anything related to electronic trading environments or the internet is the playing ground of the cyber criminals, and that's where we're looking to protect you. And that traditional insurance solution is no longer sufficient, so something new is required. So in relation to this threat landscape, we're really concerned with protecting you against loss or theft of assets that are generally intangible assets like data, any kind of damage to your network or systems that you're reliant upon, certain types of fraud and extortion, and all the downstream consequences of those issues. So when we talk about cyber risk, we try to encourage people to think of this in terms of its outcomes. So that could be theft of money, theft of assets, theft of data, theft of information, confidential information, chiefly, actual damage to networks and systems that you use or are reliant upon. Certain types of fraudulent activity, including electronic crime and extortion threats or attempts. But also, of course, it's possible within this new threat landscape for people to make honest errors in the way that they're configuring their systems, in the way that they're using email and other electronic services like that. So in terms of insurance and the response to this new threat landscape, we're also mindful of the fact that we're not just there to protect against criminal activity, although that's the chief concern, but also against simple accidental loss and damage as well. And as you may know, any organization that holds data or uses data is subject to regulatory oversight in the UK by the Information Commissioner. So it's important that we're addressing any issues that arise against organizations in a regulatory sense as well. And we do that in relation to cyber risk, this potential for you to lose critical assets or access to critical systems, sensitive and confidential information, and suffer reputational damage and perhaps loss of business as a result of these kinds of attacks. I think it's important to ask, why bother with this kind of threat? Why bother thinking about this kind of risk, and why bother insuring against it? And I think the statistic which I often quote is a study by Forbes, published by Forbes a couple of years ago, where they did some research in the US, and it was apparent that in terms of small to medium-sized businesses, the real threat to their businesses lies in cyber risk. You're far more likely to need a cyber insurance policy, to claim on a cyber insurance policy, than you are likely to need to use your fire or flood or theft insurance for those physical perils. Such is the level and ubiquity of this type of cyber threat at the moment, that unfortunately this type of insurance has shot right up to the top of the league in terms of that must-have type of insurance. So now we've looked at cyber risk and what it is. Let's look at cyber risk in a bit more detail and try to equip you with what you need to know in order to identify cyber risk. What does cyber risk look like? And right away, I'm throwing up on the screen here a slide full of technical jargon: crypto jacking and bricking and DNS tunneling and zero-day exploits and social engineering and phishing. These are all words which are bandied around the industry a lot, and to one extent or another are used to describe different types of cyber attack. And they're sometimes very technical in relation to how the cyber criminals go about their trade and how they access your networks, your data, and your systems. What I don't want to do is to overload you with too much technical jargon, because that doesn't really achieve very much for you. What I would like you to try to do, and I would encourage you to do, is think of cyber risk not so much in terms of the types of threats, the types of hacks, but the outcomes of cyber assaults. So when we think of cyber, I encourage people to think of it in terms of its outcomes, and that's unexpected costs that fall upon you in dealing with a cyber attack. That's liability, liability being you facing some kind of legal action for something that you have done or have not done sufficiently well, such as protecting other people's data, for example. Of course, the reputational damage to your organizations, your businesses, that can flow from a cyber event. And as we've touched on earlier, a regulatory action that can be taken against you by data regulators, including levying of fines and penalties. All of that arising as a result of theft of funds, theft or attempted theft of data, the damage to networks, and so on, the human error aspect, and extortion attempts and criminal activity generally online. So in relation to cyber, please think in terms of outcomes rather than the specifics of what it is. It's far easier to conceive of it that way. So we've looked at cyber, we've looked at the forms that cyber takes, and specifically the outcomes that it leads to. What it's important to do is to address how to manage cyber risk. And organizations and businesses don't have to buy insurance. It's not a mandatory requirement. It might be a contractual requirement upon you if you've signed a contract with a counterparty that requires you to have that type of insurance. But there's no central government mandated requirement for cyber insurance. It's just a very sensible thing to consider having. So in relation to that, what we tend to encourage people to do initially is to self-serve, to help yourself by understanding what cyber risk is, understanding what it looks like, both in terms of your industry sector and in terms of your own network, your own domain, if you like, and then considering what forms of cyber risk management you can introduce yourself to help to manage, to get a handle on the problem and to manage it. And my business is one that's put a lot of effort into helping different sectors of the economy to understand what cyber looks like. It's always nuanced across different sectors. Food and drink has a slightly different cyber risk profile to science and technology-based businesses. They have a slightly different cyber experience to, say, manufacturing or the professions. And my business serves a good deal of a big swathe of the economy across various different industry verticals. And we produce a lot of material and are all the time producing more material that's specific to a particular sector. So for example, this is a paper we produced recently for the construction trade, but we also have it for manufacturing and installation engineering and all sorts of other stuff as well. It's important to understand and see and get a grip on the kind of key industry cyber statistics that affect your sector that you're in. In addition, we have also produced what we call a risk heat map, where and there's a link which we'll provide to you for this, where you can actually identify your industry sector, and then the heat map will give you a plain English explanation of how cyber manifests in that industry space, to give you an idea of what cyber risk looks like in your industry. And what we also have is a library of case studies around cyber losses, which we're happy to share as well, which brings the whole area to life by explaining real world scenarios that have occurred and how insurance and risk management has helped in each case. What we're also able to do, and I'm very excited to tell you today that anybody listening in on the call, we're able to offer you a free, no obligation insights report into your own business, your own organization's cyber risk. And these reports are called KYND, as you can see on the screen here, KYND. This is a cyber vulnerability report that essentially is a free external snapshot of the cyber threats affecting your business, your domain, your network at the time that we run the report. These things take a couple of minutes to run. It's all using the latest artificial intelligence and publicly available information sources online about your domain. And then it compiles a report that RAG rates, as you can see here, specific threats, cyber threats to your business that we feel you should be aware of. And it will tell you what to do about those threats as well. So for anyone on the call today, please do message me at the email address you can see on the screen here after this event, and I'll happily provide you with a free cyber vulnerability report for your own business. The third aspect, and perhaps the most important aspect of this part of the discussion today, is about risk management. And I'm not talking about insurance at all until later. So these are steps that you can take yourselves now in order to help yourself and your organization to recognize, identify, and deal with cyber threats. And the first is very important. Some 80% of cyber attacks involve, to one extent or another, human error. Perhaps a member of staff clicking on something they shouldn't click on, or yielding information in an email which they are being duped in an email to what's called a phishing attack, to giving up information which is useful to criminals, cyber criminals. So human error is always a very common theme and feature of cyber attacks. So training staff on how to recognize cyber attacks is hugely beneficial. Staff training, cybersecurity awareness programs, particularly ones that are CPD accredited, are a very useful way, first step of turning your staff who are a particular area of vulnerability for you into your first line of defense against cyber attack. So that's a very important first point. Of course, it's very important that you or your IT providers make sure that you're using the latest firewalls and malware protection, special software and hardware configurations, which reduce the opportunity for cyber criminals to access your system in the first place, or to compromise your email system by taking control of that, as that's something that's very common. It's hugely important and very often overlooked, the strength of passwords used to control access to your network. So one very simple, and whether you're at work or at home using Netflix or other types of services like that, it's hugely important that you have a very strong password to all the services and systems that you're using. It's a very, very convenient way of making life really difficult for the cyber criminal by having a very robust, strong password policy. And these, of course, can also extend into alerting your team when someone tries to access a particular account several times and fails, for example. Secure configurations relates to any kind of limiting any kind of access or functionality within your network to the minimum that you need in order to function as a business. It's pointless giving all of your staff access to everything, because what we usually find is that depending upon where their specific role is, they may only need to use certain types of services. They might not need to access all the accounting information. They might not need to access all of your customer relationship management areas in your system. So having a think about how to configure your system in a sensible way that reduces the chance, if someone does gain access through a user email account, to limits the data that they can see, is a very sensible way forward. And of course, encrypting laptops and other devices that you have is an absolute must to make sure that if they fall into the hands of criminals, they can't access the device and they can't access the data that's on there. You may also have heard about MFA, or multi-factor authentication. You may already be using it. Particularly useful on email accounts where before you log in, perhaps remotely from home, as well as needing a password, you need to enter a PIN which is fired through to your email, your smartphone. Those kinds of double security measures are really useful in limiting the area of operations that the cyber criminal has to operate in. And of course, these days with more of our staff working remotely, it's very important that you have virtual private networks and secure remote access protocols in place to ensure that anyone accessing your system from outside of your physical environment is using a secure way of doing that. What we also should mention is that there are various accreditations that it's possible to achieve these days too. Cyber Essentials or Cyber Essentials Plus are very common ones which you may have heard of. And these are government-backed, UK government-backed accreditation standards, almost like best practice standards, if you like, for achieving a minimum acceptable level, actually a quite robust level of cybersecurity. And it's very useful. It's very useful, particularly if you're dealing with public sector clients. The government itself is contractually normally obligates its contractors to carry Cyber Essentials certification. So going through that process will make you more robust. It will also yield additional business opportunities for you in the public sector. So just eking that out in a bit more detail, my organization offers a lot of these services. You don't have to buy them from me. I'm just saying that these are the sorts of things that are available. We offer these to our clients. You should explore with your existing providers if these services are available, or give us a call about it and we can talk these through with you. We have a particular tool called MitiLearn, which is an online secure portal, a CPD accredited, scenario-based staff training tool that helps them to become more cyber aware. We can offer simulated hacking or system penetration testing services that stress test your domain and its existing security arrangements. So we can try to hack into your network and see, and then tell you afterwards where we think the weaknesses lie, so you can do something about it. We can provide Cyber Essentials accreditation solutions, which is all online. We can give advice and provide access to a secure portal that gives you a complete library of information security, a policy management suite, if you like, for your data security, information security needs. And depending upon the precise needs of your business, we can even provide a kind of full-on, always-on, eye-in-the-sky threat detection and response service. So there's a lot of different ways of providing some very rich and very useful cybersecurity services to businesses of all sizes. But I would caution you that the staff cyber awareness training is a critical one that every business should have. So we've looked at cyber, how to identify it, how to manage it. I'm going to touch on how to insure it. And being an insurance broker, you would expect me to I would be remiss if I finished up without going into this in some detail with you. And it's important that, because cyber insurance is quite a new form, relatively new form of insurance, that you're aware of how it operates. So cyber insurance operates in two ways. First of all, it protects against third-party losses, liability. And whenever we talk about liability, what we're really doing is talking about the potential for you to be sued for something. In this case, breaching somebody's privacy rights, for example, or somebody being unable to access your system that they've subscribed to because it's been hacked and you haven't properly protected it, something like that, denial of service type liability. So the policy will pay for legal defense costs, it'll pay for compensation, it'll pay for damages, it'll pay for claimants' costs awarded against you, all that sort of stuff. Works in a similar way to your employer's liability insurance and your public and product related liability insurance and professional indemnity. It's designed to be a sort of a protective blanket against being sued. Okay, so that's the first way that a policy operates. The second way it operates is that it deals with your own costs, what we call first party cyber, you being the first party. That deals with your own costs that you incur in just simply managing the fallout from an event like a cyber attack, which can be very brutal and quite painful, financially painful, particularly for smaller businesses to deal with. So looking at the first elements of that in a bit more detail, third party, as I say, it's picking up legally defending you against allegations of wrongdoing that have led to a breach of data. So it's covering liability in relation to damaged networks and systems and clouds, perhaps something nefarious like malware has passed through your system to a client's system and they're suing you for that. They're unable to access your data set. Their data has been lost or hacked or stolen. Or you are alleged to have breached individual rights of privacy, or perhaps documents have been stolen which are confidential and you face a breach of confidentiality allegation, which could be a contractual breach. However these sorts of events are purported or described to you, the policy is designed to, this part of the policy is designed to protect you against all of that. In terms of your own losses, those first party losses I mentioned, I'll bring up a lot of detail here, but essentially what the insurance policy and the insurance company does is to act as your push button emergency breach response provider. So if you have an attack, you can immediately, normally through a smartphone, connect with your insurer and say, I've got a problem. They can then swing into action and triage that problem for you, understanding what's happened, bringing into play their own service providers to help deal with the cyber attack and to manage your response to it. You may have to incur, or you will almost certainly have to, if there's been a breach of data, notify the data commissioner, and they may force you to incur costs in notifying individuals whose data has been breached. That's quite expensive to do. The policy will arrange that for you and pick up the cost of that. It could be that you might have to manage, if you've got large numbers of clients, mass inquiries from them, and set up help phone lines, set up credit monitoring services so that if data has been breached, that data isn't being used by the criminals to apply for credit or loans or mortgages and things in the name of that client. Forensic IT costs are usually need to be incurred to identify how the bad guys got access to your system in the first place. And of course, you need to manage reputational damage with public relations costs for public relations consultants to come in and help you to frame the messaging around all of your public statements in relation to a breach. So all these things can be wrapped up in the second part of the cyber policy, the first party cyber coverage. If you suffer bottom line revenue loss as a result of a cyber attack, we can also build in coverage for that as well. And if somebody uses any of the, if cyber criminals use any of the systems or information that they've managed to get on you to initiate a fraud or an extortion attempt against you, the policy will pay for that too. It'll even pay the ransom that the bad guys might be asking, if that, in the view of the insurers, will nullify the chance of a more expensive claim having to be paid down the line. So there's all sorts of really useful ways that you can use insurance to mitigate the impact of a cyber attack. But the key element here is that the insurer's breach response service holds your hand through all of that. And this is normally in the form of a smartphone app. Many insurers are getting much more sophisticated now. They'll even have their own always-on network threat detector for their policyholders. And we've had incidents where the first time a client has heard about a cyber attack against them is that their insurers have told them they're under attack and have said, don't worry, we're on this for you. We're bringing into play all of our services to help manage the response. So there's very sophisticated insurance arrangements out there. Needn't cost the stars. The sort of policies we have start from a couple of £100 a year. Of course, bigger companies will tend to have more sophisticated policies that will cost thousands of pounds, even tens of thousands of pounds, or hundreds of thousands of pounds for really large companies. But the important thing to bear in mind is that cyber insurance is available to micro and small businesses and SMEs. So insurers will be your breach response handholder, your breach response management team. They will have and maintain a slew of contracts with expert service providers, be they lawyers, be they public relations consultants, be they IT forensics companies, and they will bring those guys into play to help you recover. All of that's billed directly to the insurer to give you additional peace of mind, to help you focus on running your business and ultimately protecting your balance sheet against these kinds of things happening. So that's been a relatively quick whirl through the world of cyber risk and cyber mitigation services and cyber insurance. I would point out this cyberspace link that you see on the slide here. It's something new that we've just recently launched, which is a smartphone augmented reality experience. So grab your smartphone, go to that link, follow the instructions, and there's a whole rich seam of information on there that describes what cyber risk is in more detail. There are downloadable documents for specific industry sectors. There's all sorts of other information on there that helps you understand cyber risk. And my contact details are on here, of course, as well, if there's any specific queries that you wish to raise. And please remember that those cyber vulnerability reports going free today normally cost something like £50 or £60. We're very happy to provide to you today if you want to send me an email, and I'll ask you for a little bit of information and then provide you with a report immediately. And with that, my presentation is done, and I'd be delighted to take any questions. And please let me again thanks Wendy and her team for having me on today, and I look forward to helping you with any queries that you may have. Thank you very much.